Okay, now so let's now jump to a more normal image, not a test image anymore for now. And let's take a look at the MatteBox tab. But by MatteBox, I mean this type of device actually. So let me bring these guys here. And so yeah, a MatteBox is called kind of these blinds or flags that you put on the side of the lens hood, or maybe they act as a lens hood itself, right? We usually see them in principal photography, but just being applied on the top because usually you want to block those lens flares and light leaks coming from the sun, but sometimes the lights are coming from everywhere. You want to kind of block different light differently, sometimes on the left, on the right, from the top, and so on. So let's now play a little bit with this concept, because this actually, the fact that this is used quite often, and this changes the rendering quality of the image quite a bit. In the 3-hour investigation that I did, that I'm linking, I'm putting a link to that video below. I talk about how MatteBox affect the image, and you can see examples that I did with in the real world with some lenses. So you're gonna be able to appreciate how much a MatteBox affect the shape of a bokeh and all that. But let's just quickly develop this shot, and let's now do some treatment to this image of electronics. So this is a computer motherboard on top of a wood table, and let's say we want to focus on this logo over here. And another thing to notice is that MatteBox uses only works with external kernels. So it's not going to work with disk or bladed. You need to switch to image. So let's switch to image now for both fields. And let's increase the size. So let's increase maximum, and let's try real high value so you can see the result in your. So there it is, you can better see now. Let's make probably the foreground a little bit bigger. So let's try a maximum of 30 and 20 and 25 here, because we need to see the effect of the MatteBox. So I think that's gonna be enough. Yeah. So there it is. You can see the leaf defocus from the leaf kernel there, and this one is the one that I'm using for the background here. So it's picking up really nice in the highlights. So it's kind of looking very good. And let's now switch to MatteBox, and by default is disabled, so let's enable it. And let me show you these two checkboxes. So if I enable the preview kernel, I can preview the kernel for both fields. And let's wait for this to calculate. And so you can preview the background field and the foreground field. So here we have the BG field flags. So these are the flags You can think about MatteBox made of 4 flags, just like you would see here. So we have 1, 2, 3, and you would have a 4th one at the bottom. So these flags are also divided in the fields. So you would usually, if you use a value in these flags, so you have the left, right, top and bottom, you would probably use the same value for the other field. So let's now put a flag value or a flag cropping in the background field. So by that I mean, if you preview the kernel and if you increase the angle of the left flag, so you bring the left flag in, so let's say you use a value of 100, you're going to see that the flag is gonna crop on the opposite side in the bokeh shape. In other words, the bokeh shape is gonna get cropped in the opposite side of where the flag is. So if the flag is on the left in the real world, on the side left of the frame, the bokeh shape is gonna get cropped on the right side, just like it happens in real optics. If you do the same on the right, you're gonna see cropping on the left. If you increase values on the top, so you have a top flag, you're gonna see bokeh cutting on the bottom, and the same for the bottom one. Then you have a softness control. You might find this useful. And the recenter control, we're gonna look at it in a second. So let's just look at how this looks aesthetically. So let's introduce a higher angle of the left flag in the background field, and you're going to see how the bokeh gets cut on the right. So if we disable MatteBox and we re-enable, you can see the effect of having a flag on the left is gonna produce a cutting on the right. With that cutting, you're going to also perceive a translation effect. So I don't know if you can tell there. But you can see kind of the image is shifting a little bit from right to left, so you can compensate with the recenter. So if you recenter, let's say you use a 50, maybe that was too much, but you can compensate a little bit. Usually half of the value of the one you use here is going to be enough to kind of retain the image in the centered, and the cutting to happen without having a shift. I actually like to leave this at 0 because I actually like that little shift. I think it looks optically correct. I see the same happening in the real world in some tests I made, which you can see in those in that 3-hour video investigation I did. So this is something that kind of happens. So let's say that now instead of having a flag on the left, you have the usual one on the top. So you're gonna see the bokeh cropping at the bottom, and there it is. And you're usually gonna use the same value for the background field. So in here, if I introduce a value of 100, I also gonna see a bokeh cutting at the bottom of the bokeh shape. So now the entire image is suffering, is rendering, the lens is rendering the effects of having a MatteBox introduced. You're gonna find this like very cool, maybe to use in night shots where you have lights and very bright highlights. So let's bring that to 0, and maybe you're using MatteBoxes on each side, so maybe let's add a 70 on the sides, and now your render is gonna update and you're gonna see a little bit of bokeh cutting on the sides of the bokeh. Sometimes that's not enough to reach the edges, so that was enough for the background, but looks like the foreground needs a little bit more, so let's use 100 on each side. Remember that this is going to be, so any kernel image that you put in here is going to be reformatted by 512 on each side, so that explains why sometimes even 100 might not be enough. So if we disable, now we can see the entire image being affected by the MatteBox. Let's wait to update. So the computer is getting a little bit slow with the recording, and I have a GPU that is not very powerful. And then you also can increase the softness, so maybe you want to increase the softness, you kind of have to go high, so it's actually going to look a little bit more optically correct by using some softness. So you can try it. Sometimes maybe you don't want to use it, but I can use some kind of value of softness. It kind of looks more realistic compared to some real world examples that I have used with my lenses. I have a collection of vintage lenses that I have tried these, and they usually the MatteBox when I apply it, it kind of doesn't produce a very harsh edge on the sides of the bokeh, but it can have some softening. So yeah, I kind of used to look, I kind of like to use this. On top of all this, because this is kind of what happens at bokeh level when you use MatteBox, you would also like to introduce the effect that using a MatteBox has luminance wise in the image. So if in this case we are using a right and left and right MatteBox, so we want to introduce some darkness on the left and right side of the frame. So we want to lower the value a little bit. So if I go really high, that's what happens. So if you have a MatteBox in the real world, you're gonna see a very tiny lowering of the value of the luminance on the side of the frame. If the case were that we are not using side flags, but we are doing some cropping in top and bottom, what you should do is, if that's what you want aesthetically, you would go to the bottom and top flags, and you will lower the intensity in there too, because you have these blockers of light going into your lens. So you lower a little bit the top and the bottom, and now you're having the effect of flags of MatteBox, both in the bokeh shape and also in the luminance of the frame. And then you have global amount, so if you increase this, the entire frame gets a little bit de-lift. So what happens when you don't have matte boxes and you're in very kind of shiny conditions, in an exterior condition with a lot of sunlight, the image tends to wash very quickly. So with this control, if you have the 4 flags in your MatteBox, maybe you don't want to use these ones. You leave this at default and you just introduce a little bit of delift and deleak effect on the frame, just like so. So that's it. That's the use for MatteBox. One last clarification that I wanted to make on MatteBox is that the opposite side thing. So for example, if your flag is on the right, so you're doing this, you're gonna have a cropping on the left of the bokeh, and that's correct. But the lower intensity or lower in the luminance on the frame color wise, that one indeed corresponds to the same side. So if your flag is on the right, you're gonna go to the right and you're gonna lower the intensity there a little bit. Okay, so the opposite side thing in optics only happens to the bokeh shape. Just wanted to clarify that, so you don't think that because you have a flag on the right you need to lower the intensity on the left. That's not correct. This only applies, and it happens automatically, for the bokeh shape.